Hello, everyone. I'm Elliot Mizrahi. I'm the Vice President of Communications and Content at Page, and I'm so excited to welcome you to today's Page Patrons webinar, which we've titled Build Your Company Culture with Workplace from Facebook. Today's webinar is part of a series that Page is conducting as part of our Page Patrons program. We know that there are so many ComTech solutions out there, so we developed Page Patrons as a way to showcase a few of them and show off kind of the best learnings about what they can do in action. Today's webinar is made possible with support from our Page Patron Facebook Workplace, which is a communications tool that connects everyone in your company, even if they're working remotely. Their client success manager, Lea Truitt, will be leading a conversation today with Page members Stacy Tank, who's the Chief Transformation and Corporate Affairs Officer at Heineken, and Shannon LaPierre, who's the CCO at Stanley Black & Decker. After they'll chat, we'll open it up for discussion with all of you. Now, I'm especially excited about this particular webinar because it really reflects the intersection of two of the dimensions of CCO leadership that we identified as being crucial in our CCO's Pacesetter report, but also that have become even more so amid the pandemic. And those are culture and technology. In fact, over the last year, we've hosted dozens of Page conversations with members as they've navigated the pandemic. And what we heard constantly was that remote work was demanding new ways of working, collaborating, communicating, and that as a result, it was causing them to think differently about how they build and evolve their culture in a virtual environment. The stories that we're going to hear today in the context of workplace get right to the heart of both. I'll turn it over to Lea in a moment, but before that, just a few housekeeping items. Today's webinar is being recorded, and we're doing that just so that members who have not been able to attend will be able to check it out later. We want this to be a really interactive hour, so please use the chat throughout to add any comments or questions or to indicate that you'd like to speak. I'll be moderating, so a little bit later in this call, I'll call on people to speak up if they've entered something in the chat. And once I do, please remember to identify yourself with your name and organization. Everybody forgets to do this, but it's really helpful just for continuity. Please also keep your camera turned on. That helps it make it feel like we're together. I know we've pinned our videos to the front here, but as we get the group conversation going, it would be wonderful to see everybody as we do. Finally, if anybody has been working for, and remember to mute your line as well to avoid disruption. Finally, if anyone has been working with a ComTech partner that they think might make a good patron to learn from, if you can send me or my colleague Kelly Green a message, we will follow up with you afterwards. With that, I am very happy to hand it over to Lea to kick off our discussion.
Thank you so much, Elliot, for the introduction. And Stacy and Shannon, thank you all so much for joining today to chat with us about workplace and about culture and technology. Absolutely two topics that are so relevant today and that we're really passionate about at Workplace. So Elliot, like you mentioned, I'm Lea Truitt. I'm a client success manager at Workplace, which means that I get to work with some of our amazing customers like Shannon and team at Stanley Black & Decker, who I work directly with, to really help them use Workplace to work on their culture and their communication strategy and really meet their goals in that space. And it's such an incredible opportunity with so many things that are happening and changing in this space. And before I joined Workplace, I actually was a customer of Workplace. So I spent almost a decade in corporate communications, focusing on culture change and transformation, especially helping employees navigate these key moments that companies are going through. And right before this, I was at WW, which was Weight Watchers, and I was leading internal communications there through the company's brand transformation. And so when I was in that role, I came in right at the time that Mindy Grossman, our new CEO, had come in. I was leading internal communications, and we were launching a new brand for the organization, a new purpose, and really just a new way of doing business that was going to help us succeed in the future. And one of the things that Mindy always said when she talked about transformation is that it has to start from the inside. Transformation is inside out. And so as the leader for internal communications, what that meant for us is that we needed a way to be able to connect with every single employee, our frontline employees, our office employees around the globe. And we needed to be able to get our messages to them, hear their feedback, and really be able to connect with them on a deeper level. And so in 2017, we launched Workplace to our almost 20,000 employees around the globe. And it was an absolute game changer in how we communicated. All of a sudden we were able to connect with every employee, and we were seeing messages from our employees in Australia who were saying that they felt like they were just down the hall from employees in the UK. We were seeing our coaches around the globe start to share best practices and help each other solve problems. And we had all of these community social groups where we were bringing people together over shared interests. And no matter if you were a C-suite officer or if you were a frontline employee, you were connecting over your love of photography or maybe your love of running, and really being able to build those connections that never would have been possible before. And so it was just an absolute game changer for us. I saw the magic of the product. And so about a year and a half ago, I came over to Workplace, and now I get to be a part of really building out the Workplace strategy and bringing this to organizations and helping them realize the power of Workplace. So I'm thrilled today to be part of this conversation, coming from a communications background and seeing the power of Workplace, and to be able to have a conversation with Stacey and Shannon about the role that Workplace plays. So just quickly before I jump in, I'll give you a little overview of what Workplace is if you're not familiar with it. So Workplace is, it's essentially Facebook, the same user look and feel of Facebook, but for companies. And Workplace was developed within Facebook as our company grew and scaled from a small startup into an organization with 50,000 plus employees, as a way that we could keep our organization connected and that we could maintain the culture that was so important to us digitally. And Workplace, like I said, started for Facebook. We saw this opportunity to really be able to expand it out. And so now it's a product that we deliver to companies to help you maintain your culture and your communication strategies. And building community is really at the core of everything that we do at Facebook. It's why we exist. We want to bring the world closer together. And one of those communities that's so important is your work community. And so that's where Workplace fits in, is that this is one of the most important communities in your life. So how can we really bring that to life and really be able to bring some of those same community building tools to organizations that you might have in your personal life? And we think we're really uniquely positioned to do this. I mean, Facebook really is the birthplace of digital community. Facebook and Instagram are the home to tons of influencers. And so when we look at what we want to do in the future, we really want to bring more of those consumer tools into the organization space. So when you think about executives and how executives communicate, how can we start thinking about executives more like influencers and bringing some of those same strategies? How can we start thinking about ourselves as communicators, not just as communicators, but actually as creators who are creating engaging content to be able to reach audiences and inspire them in new ways? And then in doing that, how can we turn companies that are, groups of people from around the globe into communities where you're really inspiring and helping each other and moving your business strategy forward because of it? So that's a little bit about Workplace and where we're going. We can chat more as we go through. But now I'd love to turn over to Stacey and Shannon. And maybe before we jump into questions, would each of you all like to just introduce yourselves quickly and just give a brief overview of kind of where you came to Workplace, and then we'll jump into the questions. So Stacey, would you like to go first?
Sure, Leah, thank you. And thanks for having me. It's great to be here with Shannon, another amazing brand that we are a big fan of in this household, using your tools all the time. So I just returned as a boomerang to Heineken in June last year, and I'm leading our growth strategy and our transformation and our operationalization of that transformation, making sure we deliver on it. We call Evergreen, which is writing our next growth chapter. As part of that, I have our public affairs, government relations, sustainability, and global communications teams that roll up as well. So it's been really cool to come back to Heineken in this moment, because before I left, we were having, and it was five and a half years ago, when I left, we were having the very first discussions with Facebook Workplace, and we piloted in the operating company that I came from. And then I went on and had some other experiences and came back to find that it had been completely scaled to all 80 operating companies all over the world. It has become one of our most beloved tools. So for many reasons, it's great to be with you today.
Thanks, Stacey. Shannon, over to you.
Sure. And it's interesting because Stacey, my workplace experience was actually fairly similar to yours, ironically. But I lead our global communications at Stanley Black & Decker, and our team also includes our corporate marketing and our sponsorships for all of our brands. So DeWalt, Craftsman, Stanley Black & Decker, and all the brands that are probably in your toolboxes and garages and in your homes. And then also the government relations team, philanthropy, and then internal and external communications. I've been at the company for about 4.5 years, joined to really creating kind of build that group and team. We had some disparate groups and focus areas and kind of not a strong focus on communications historically as an organization. So we've been building that over time. And I came after leading communications at the Hartford, and then had taken about 1.5 years off between jobs, just decided it was time for a break and to do something different, and ended up getting my master's at Johns Hopkins, and then ended up at Stanley Black & Decker. So a little bit of a pause and kind of break, which was really, really nice. Highly advised if you can find a window to do that in your career. But we had been looking at social media platforms at the Hartford many, many years ago. And Facebook was working on something for corporations, companies at that time, but wasn't really scalable and ready to deploy. And so we launched another platform. And I can talk about that in our decision making to go with Workplace. So I was really pleased when we decided to launch a social platform at Stanley Black & Decker that the product had evolved to a place where it was scalable and something that was deployable, because I'd say that process was a lot easier than what we did several years ago at the Hartford, for sure. So.
Great. Well, thank you. We're so pleased to have both of you all as part of the Workplace community. So to dive in, Stacey, when you were doing your intro, you were talking about coming back to Heineken. I think that the time that you came back was around the same time that Heineken had a new CEO stepping in. And so you were really thinking about leadership communication. So can you talk a little bit about that experience of coming back in, managing leadership communications, and then just in general, how you've been thinking about culture and communications during this time?
Sure. Yeah. Rejoining the company, it was a very interesting moment, as you mentioned, because it was a moment of profound change. And the role that I had just before this, I was running a couple of multi-billion-dollar businesses for Home Depot. And we were in an incredible transformation. This part of the business was shrinking double digits. We had a lot of challenges, too many to list now, from culture to strategy to talent to systems to no innovation pipeline, et cetera, et cetera. And the very first thing that we did, because so many leaders had come through those businesses and said, hey, it's going to change, it's going to be different, trust me. And then they kind of went away and the organization didn't hear from them again. And then the revolving door continued. And one of the first things we did, I think my second week in that job, was to jump on a live town hall with live unfiltered Q&A and be very present and accountable to the organization, which is something that we then did every few weeks. And I sat there with the leadership team and said, it really is going to be different, but what matters is how much I listen and our actions and what we do and the progress we make over time. And I promise you, I'm going to come back and we're going to talk about how it's going, what we can do, what we can't do, the order that we're going to do it in. And I want to hear from you. Every time, unfiltered, what's on your mind. I didn't have Facebook Workplace as a platform. So we did all of that manually. We did all of that through a broadcast network that we had and all these ramshackle tools that we knit together with duct tape. So coming back to Heineken in a moment on June 1st, where we had a new CEO newly promoted after our other CEO retired after 15 years as CEO, over 30 years with the company. We had our growth strategy reaching its natural conclusion in 2020, as it was. We had COVID that closed all the bars and restaurants essentially around the whole world, which is not the best thing to have happen to you when you're in the beer and cider business. And we knew that we had to take care of our employees and our communities and our partners, manage through the crisis, but while building a brighter future. And Facebook Workplace, thank goodness, was already rolled out everywhere in the world. So we could immediately start sharing the vision for where we were going, trying to deeply listen to folks on the front lines, because unlike the 20 years before, or at least the years I was running these businesses at Home Depot, where every single week I was on a plane, I was belly to belly with customers, I was with our frontline employees, and I was listening, and I could feel what was going on in the business. We can't get on, even now in the Netherlands, we're not very vaccinated here. There is no travel. We cannot get on planes. I cannot get a feeling for the business other than through forums like this, but through Workplace, which I'm on every day, many times. And so we're doing these live town halls with our CEO and our executive team, and the live Q&As continuously. We're posting and monitoring which countries have the highest engagement rates and trying to create a little bit of a competition, and hoping that also in a time where it feels like everything is shifting and there's so much that's unknown, and country to country, in our South African market right now, things continue to just completely shut down, and our employees are in such a state of continual stress. For folks to be able to hear, all 85,000 employees, what are the priorities? Where are we going? It gives people a little bit of a sense of being held by something that's known in the middle of an incredible ocean of chaos. So I can't imagine, we would have, I guess, been sending a lot of emails. I don't know quite how we would have done all of this communication without the platform being in place. And I would call us a heavy user at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that point you made about being able to deeply listen to your employees, and how, before you were able to go and actually be with them and listen. And I think just thinking back on my own experience too, this was one of the things that was so critical for how we used Workplace at WW, was as we were going through this brand transformation, we realized that we had this immediate window into how our employees were thinking about things, how they were feeling about things. And in some cases, we were getting, not positive feedback. It was negative reactions to things that were happening. But what that allowed us to do is to take that, understand who those people were who may not be as comfortable with some of the changes and transitions we were making, point a specific communication strategy towards that, and to recognize where we had the gaps and to be able to fill that in. And that window that you have into your employees and the feedback that you can receive from that two-way communication it's so powerful.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And the co-creation, we have this month and next month, 10 jams, we call them, where we invite employees from all over the world to get into a little Facebook room with us. And we do questions and answers and a brainstorm over the course of an hour with 5 or 6 questions. It's focused on purpose and values for the series. And you have a completely democratized forum where if you're an introvert, if you're an extrovert, if you speak English well, if you don't really speak English well, it doesn't matter. It's a perfect equalizer. Everyone's voice matters, and we can build on each other's ideas and create something together. So yeah, it's a powerful platform.
Great. So Shannon, would love to hear from you now. Would love to hear a little bit about you all launching Workplace. What did that process look like for you? And what have been some of the benefits and the impact, especially I know health and safety is really important to Stanley Black & Decker, as well as diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah, thanks. And it sounds like Stacey and I are kind of paid spokespeople for this product, which we're not. I think just big advocates, because we've been able to see kind of the real transformative power that Workplace has had in our companies, and opened up some doors and windows that maybe we didn't even know existed previously, which has been amazing. So as I said, I joined the company about 4.5 years ago. The COO had recently been promoted to CEO, had been with the company about 20 years, and you had put in place with some time to prepare to make that transition to CEO, had been working on his strategy and his approach to kind of how he was going to run and operate the company going forward. And so when I was brought in, the first assignment was working on launching, excavating and launching our company's purpose, which we did on a really accelerated timetable. So I had officially joined in October, but started that work a couple months before, and we launched it. We were planning to launch it at our leadership meeting in January, and then to employees after that. And coming in, we really didn't have a we didn't have a robust internal communications infrastructure. And so email was really the primary communications tool. We had an intranet that really was just a kind of business process type of intranet where you go to get to where you need to go. And so, frankly, I went into a bit of a panic on trying to figure out how we were going to launch Purpose to 60,000 employees around the globe in 60 countries where people didn't speak the same language and share the same connection to the organization and the company. They often felt that they worked for their brand. So the employees felt like they worked for DeWalt, they worked for Craftsman, they worked for our engineered fastening business that had its own brands like Helicoil. So they were connected into their brands and their products as opposed to the company and the entity. And to do the kinds of things we wanted to do as an organization, from talent development and alignment and engagement and accelerating and technology and innovation transformation that we were working on, we had to find a way to bring together everyone from commonality. So Purpose was a great way to do that. I just didn't know how we were going to deliver that and get employees engaged in it. And so we ended up looking at a couple of different platforms. We had one of our digital innovation teams was doing a pilot of Workplace at the time. And I was just thrilled to find at the platform had advanced to the point where it was. And so it was an incredibly easy process in comparison to what we had done in previous lives with launching a social platform, because you were able to turn it on very easily. You could customize some of it, but it didn't require mass customization. It didn't require intensive IT resources, which we just didn't have available to us at the time to launch something like this. And so that made it a lot smoother and a lot easier. And for training, most of our employees were very familiar with Facebook and how it worked, and globally as well. So the training and uptake time for most of the employees was pretty smooth and easy. And there were so many employees that were just so excited to have this platform in the company because they had it in their personal lives and they wanted to have that connection and that same opportunity in the work environment. And the other kind of gating factor for us that made the decision on who to partner with easier was the translation capabilities. So employees can post in their native language and you can read it in your native language. And the ability to have that capability for our employees, where of the 60,000 employees we had at the time, only about 15,000 were in the US. And so that gap of that jump that employees have to make to be able to communicate is really big for folks where English isn't their language, and they get very concerned about how am I going to come across in this professional environment when I'm trying to speak a language that's not mine. And that kind of took that out of it. And what was really interesting is we had a lot of early adopters, and we decided to just kind of slow roll the launch and let the early adopters use it, get familiar with it, and do what they want with it in a very kind of open way, very trusting. So, letting employees have that opportunity to play and learn as they went along, as opposed to dictating a lot of formality around the system, worked very well for us. I think from a senior leadership perspective, we needed to do more training and education on how to use it to advance their business goals. And so that happened kind of over time. And getting folks comfortable, I think Lea mentioned some of the very personal kinds of things that people share. We had a lot of debate on, well, this is a work platform, should it be just work? But particularly as we've found even more recently, I think we've recognized how important the forum is, but being able to share those personal stories and personal experiences have just become so important to employees that we probably didn't recognize even how important that piece was going to be from an engagement and connection factor until the pandemic hit. And then we've been able to use it in a lot of different ways for the pandemic. Our community engagement, our connection with our employees and health and safety have really become paramount. We've kept well over 100 manufacturing plants up and operating around the globe during this period, in part because of really tight and clear safety protocols and practices in our plants, and mask wearing and safety timeouts that are held globally quarterly to make sure our plants are all aligned with the safety practices and protocols. And one of the interesting things we've been able to use Workplace for is normally with our plant managers, we'd ask them to kind of respond back via email or check off a box that, yes, we conducted the safety protocol section. And there's a bit of trust there that you have to assume that those sessions happened in the way they were intended. But now they can proudly, right? Plant managers can proudly post videos and pictures of the safety timeout check that they had in the plant, which then, is encouraging and aligning for the other plant managers in a way to know that really happened in images and video, which has been amazing. And then our employees, it amazes me sometimes the things our employees do for their communities and for one another in the company, and their ability to share those across the organization is just breathtaking, whether it's creating masks, 3D printing masks for their sister's hospital in France, and all the employees jumping in to help produce those masks because they've got 3D printers at home. We had employees in India that were, volunteered after work, and the team of them were working in a food bank every night, making dinner for folks who had been impacted by the pandemic. And those stories are heartwarming. And then also it's a great way to find content for your communications efforts, right? Because now you can wake up in the morning and you see what's happened in Asia and in Europe. And those stories are really what makes the company come alive to the employees across the organization.
Yeah. I love those stories. And Shannon, one thing that if we could dig in just a little bit, I love some of the work that your team has done around leadership communications and how you've really humanized your leaders, put them forward, as their authentic selves. And I think that's something that is really important to Workplace, because when you're on Workplace, you are a person first, and it's very much you, a reflection of you and who you are and how you show up at work. So could you share a little bit around some of the things that you all have done around leadership communications? And Stacey, you may have some other things to add here as well.
Sure. Yeah, I'm watching these amazing questions roll in. This is going to be a lot of fun.
I'm trying to read and talk at the same time.
I know. I was doing
first, and I'll read the questions.
Perfect. I was doing the same thing. Regarding our leaders, there is a spectrum of folks who are more and less comfortable. The good news in our case is that our CEO, I guess he is technically Gen X, but he's a young Gen Xer. He's 47, and he's very, very much on his phone, WhatsApping, texting, and work chatting and posting, et cetera. So he has set a standard for the leaders in the company to be engaged, and that it's okay to post, it's okay to share personal things, et cetera. But I definitely see a spectrum of folks who are more private than other people, or who aren't. It's mostly that they're not comfortable with the technology. So we support those who need a little more support, and we have great data that tells us who's engaging, who's posting, who's not, what kind of content is spawning the most engagement. And we have a dashboard we look at in a weekly meeting that we have with the team, and then with the executive committee, we look at it every month to try to figure out, where's the energy. And employees, we know they engage in stories that are about people. In a prior life, actually, the most popular subgroup that someone set up was cat lovers. And the cat lovers were in this group, and they were the most engaged people, and they would dress the cats up in company gear and do all these things. But you know what? It's great because they're enthusiastic and they're happy to be at work, and they love their cats. What's not to like? So I do think a little bit of training, a little bit of leadership from the top, setting the examples to show what's possible, making it safe for people to try things, making sure they know where the delete button is, because of course we have oops moments, but that's all part of the fun. It's helped people get more and more comfortable over time. I noticed there also seem to be cultural differences when I look across our 80 operating companies which companies are more engaged versus less engaged. There are parts of the world, I think, that are innately more eager to be on their mobile phone sharing in social versus less so. And the other thing, perhaps worth mentioning, we have a workforce that spans office type locations and breweries and malteries and distribution and logistics. And so we've got all types of employees all over the world. And the platform I find also to be very democratizing when it comes to that broad and divergent audience, because many folks or most folks have some type of smartphone, including in emerging markets in Africa and the Asia Pacific region and South America. We see, widespread use of smartphones, and folks easily, instead of having to, even 5 years ago or 10 years ago, be at a terminal to get on the intranet or whatever it is, now it's in their pocket. And they readily access it and eagerly contribute that way. So I think instead of feeling like in the head office, I hear the sentiment, but what about the brewery colleagues? And I think this is even more accessible for the brewery employees than anything has ever been that's come before. So I see that also as a huge advantage. And we see those employees more engaged often than our office employees.
Yeah, that's great. And I think what we've seen is, leaders sometimes, especially initially, I think everyone struggled with exactly how to use and what to use. And we still, it's an evolution, right? As the world has been changing so fast around us as well. And what we have done is we forced quite a bit on emails, right? Not sending emails. And if you want to send your business update, you put it on Workplace, which then can automatically generate an email that will direct people to go to Workplace, right? So you don't kind of completely eliminate it for everything, but that way you're driving people to that as a place for having the discussion. And I think that piece has become really important. And I think helped with some of the transition. And once people could see that when they post something on Workplace, then there's a dialogue that happens afterwards. There's comments, there's the ability to the leader can go back in and comment. They can see what people are saying about the topic. We can help flag things for them as well too. And for the average employee to have the CEO or their business president or a senior leader, their team lead, go in and like or comment on one of their posts is one of them. I think it really took leaders off guard a little bit, how meaningful that was for folks on their teams, because most people don't get an opportunity to engage at that level. And I think Stacey's in the past talked about the democratization, right? It kind of puts folks on a level playing field. And I think we've really seen that through the pandemic with a lot of Zoom meetings, right? Where everyone is a square in a box in the meeting, right? So there's no longer someone who's sitting at the head of the table who's in charge. There's no longer the person who has the nicest office, right? Because we can put whatever office we want behind us. If we want to have the best office in the room, we can put that in our Zoom background. And so I think those pieces are really, really important. And then as it relates to a lot of the issues around diversity and inclusion and racial equity in particular, it's given our employees an opportunity to share their stories and their voices and be part of the process of getting our broader company really understanding and appreciating some of the issues and challenges. And people have been sharing fairly personal, meaningful stories in very professional ways about their experiences as a woman in the workforce or a working mom or an African American, and things that have happened to them and the support, how to be an ally. We're able to have some dialogues and discussions on those kinds of topics where I really don't know how you would do that in an organization and have that kind of shared learning that we're able to have through a social engagement platform.
Great. Well, thank you both so much for sharing your point of view on this. The questions are rolling in on the right-hand side of the screen. So Elliot, I'll turn back over to you so we can get into some of these meaty questions that are coming through.
That sounds great. And I'm going to make a prediction that we won't have time to get to all of these amazing questions. So I want to assure everybody we will follow up with answers to everyone's questions for whatever we don't get to. I feel like the first question, excuse me, from Lori Hecker, who's with Hess, kind of relates to the point, Shannon, that you were just making. Lori, would you like to come off mute and ask your question?
Sure. And thank you all for putting this together. And in the spirit of full disclosure, we are workplace users at Hess as well. And by and large have seen really good take up and adoption, but there are pockets who are uncomfortable with this type of an interactive platform, both leaders and employees. So I am curious, and I've seen some other questions in the chat that are related to that. I'm curious how you're overcoming any of that resistance, and are you having to continue to maintain multiple alternatives for those who prefer to stay old school? So,
Lori, first, thank you for the Hess trucks. My boys love them. They've received them for the holidays for the last decade. I hope you never stop making them. We have a living room full of them. Thank you. Yeah, a couple of thoughts. One, I would say that the employees that work within teams where the leaders are more engaged in transparent communication on Facebook have higher employee engagement scores. So there's a statistical relationship between transparency and engagement on this tool and how happy people are and how likely they are to stay with you. And so we can tell the story in the data. Sometimes that's not enough, though, because and there's another question I saw lower down from Ethan McCarty regarding ethics, privacy, all the issues surrounding the Facebook platform, the headlines, et cetera. And I feel like I have been completely on both sides of this. I'm in an organization now that loves this platform and sees so much value that we don't even have that conversation. I was in another organization where it was a very big deal. So I think it's like anything, it's a personal choice. I would say that the data tells me that it's really helping us to create a rich and high trust working environment. But we've also, on the advertising side of our business, had a lot of discussions with Carolyn Everson and the Facebook team on the way other side than I think Lea's team about all the practices around hate speech and all the improvements that are being made and the algorithms, which you can read about. I think that the company's, in my opinion, been as transparent as they could possibly be about all the good work that's happening there. And that's a personal decision. But I would say we're comfortable. We're super close to the details, and we've been comfortable and confident. And actually, I do hear leaders uncomfortable more about publishing and not wanting to look silly. But I don't hear, and it's interesting being in Europe, I would think I would hear more pushback because privacy is a bigger topic here. But since I've been back, I haven't heard a whole lot. So my 2 cents on that.
And I think we certainly up front, I think we had more pushback. We did have very strong advocacy from our CEO on this, which I think made a huge difference in people's acceptance level. But we still definitely had people that were less interested in it. And there were some things we looked at up front, particularly around email open rates, right? Our email open rates were incredibly low. And so we did just some work on education on the fact that, basic things of where you think you've communicated, but you actually haven't. I sent an email, therefore I've communicated, but no one's received it on the other end. And so some data supporting kind of what's working and not working in the current environment, I think was really helpful because it is a big transition for folks. And we did have early on folks that still needed to send the email just to kind of confirm that they had done what they were planning to do. And we did some of that. And then eventually the woman who runs our enterprise communications team just kind of stopped sending them. And we just really kind of geared everyone to that as our place. And it was some education work. There are folks that are very active users. There are folks that are not very active users. Even some of our inactive users, though, are on it, and they like it because they feel that they're informed. And we did have, particularly when we launched, and some commentary from employees on why are we doing this? This is a distraction from the business. It's just interesting. Some of those employees who had made those kind of comments months later sent me emails very specifically saying, I know I said this, but I got to tell you, this is the best thing I've ever seen. And so, any kind of change just takes some process for people to go through that and to understand the value. And look, no communications tool is perfect. And so you have to acknowledge that too. But this has been a way to really connect and be more transparent. And the folks and leaders that have embraced it have recognized the value that it can bring to their teams.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Next question I see here, and I actually see the same question or similar one from Jennifer Well. This one's from Jennifer Hirsch with the Grossman Group. Jennifer, do you want to come off mute, ask your question about frontline employees?
Sure. Thanks, Elliot. Hi, everyone. We work with a variety of clients, often that have very diverse employee groups, corporate, commercial sales, frontline, manufacturing-based employees who are accustomed to different levels of digital communication. Some of them, thinking about the manufacturing employees, they don't even have emails. So introducing a new internet platform or digital social workplace is a big step for them. So I'm curious kind of what strategies you've taken in rolling out Workplace, thinking about your different employee groups from frontline workers to corporate folks who are more accustomed to, digital communications in general.
Sure. Maybe I know we were talking a little bit about this before. I almost feel like it was a solution for the they don't have email challenge, which plagued us for decades, I think, in the corporate communications world. Now there's this more native way that people, as Shannon was saying, we use these tools. I'm on Instagram, I hate to admit how many times a day, personally, just checking my sister's children and all the good things that are happening there, buying clothes I don't need or whatever is happening on Instagram. And I think I watch my Instagram stories more than TV. In fact, I know I do because I don't really watch anything but CNBC. And somehow, because the platforms feel familiar to our employees, they're really comfortable jumping on. And email was never going to be the solution. So it's nice to have something that has utility. You don't need training. It's natural. It's designed for no training manual experience needed. And so we found the uptake to be kind of native. And then it is contingent on how much the local leaders, whether it's a shift leader or the plant brewery leader or whomever, when they're more engaged and they're doing contests and they're using the platform. I love how Shannon's using safety examples, because if you can make safety cool and fun, that is amazing and a direct business impact that could save someone's life. So it's pretty amazing how natural the uptick has been. When you put just a little fuel on the fire, we've seen incredible engagement. But I think, Shannon, you probably have some great examples as well.
Well, maybe not great examples. So we put all our employees that had email access are on Workplace. And so that includes frontline employees like our security technicians. So we also have a big electronic security business. So all the frontline employees from that perspective, and our leadership and management teams and all our plants are on. So we've gone back and forth many times on putting all our manufacturing workers on the platform, and had difficulty finding kind of the best solution to do that. And so we had held off. And part of it is because each of our plants are kind of, run by that plant manager and that leadership, and not all of them do have, personal phone access, but that I think has changed quite a bit since we launched. And we're now looking at within, I can't remember if it's in the last year or so, Workplace has created the ability to create smaller groups so that we can have a group for the manufacturing plant, right? So that the manufacturing leader, they can post some things from our, some corporate news, but then they can do plant related content that may be very relevant for that facility. And so we're working on some of that. And in the meantime, we're using Workplace almost as a content distribution tool to the plant leaderships so that they can then have access to the tools, whether it's the safety timeout, the video content, signage for their video communications within the plants and alignment. So it does get to them, but we haven't gotten to that, to bridge that final step of letting them have it in their pockets. And, it also, back to the safety piece, one of the things that would be really wonderful about having that capability is we did have, right before I joined the company, we had an issue where there was a shooting. The employee had been escorted from the building and grabbed a gun from their car and was shooting at the building. No one was hurt, no one got injured, thankfully. But what that kind of alerted us to is, what kind of system do you have in place within a plant to flag all your employees that something's going on without potentially alerting an active shooter situation? And you could send alerts. There's safety capabilities in there and things that we could be using within the plant environment that we think would be really helpful. So this has been on our list, and we're really hoping to solve for this year, because it's just our frontline essential workers are that's what's been keeping our company going during this pandemic. It's what's been keeping our society going. When we talk about our purpose for those who make the world, it is about the frontline essential workers. And this is a tool that can be not only helpful for engaging and connecting them to the company, but really getting the information that they need, whether it's HR benefits information or safety things that could be so helpful to them. So I hope we solve this, Lea, this year.
We're working on it. And I'll just add too, there's a variety of different ways that we solve for frontline and, have different capabilities. So if anyone's interested in diving into this more, just reach out after and we can definitely have a conversation on it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Actually, I've gotten a couple of comments that people are interested in seeing the platform itself. So at the end of this conversation, Lea will include her contact in the chat if you'd like to follow up. We'll also field a survey, and there's a little field there if you want to get a follow-up to learn more about Workplace. You can do that as well. The next question here comes from, I apologize in advance for mispronouncing this name, Minka Biel with DSM Communications and Branding in the Netherlands. Minka, if it's okay, I'll ask your question. I think, Lea, maybe we'll start with you. The question is, how does Workplace help make more data-driven decisions when it comes to employee communications? For example, content and sentiment analysis. Lea, do you want to start with some of the capabilities, and then Shannon and Stacy, maybe how you use them?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say this is a huge area of focus for Workplace is insights and analytics. We know this is something that we can really excel at because we're very good at it on the Facebook side. And more and more, the expectations for how you report on internal communications are very similar to how you're reporting on advertising effectiveness when it comes to external communications. So some of the things that we have in platform right now is we have data that will help you understand like your usage of Workplace. So you can identify, across your community, are there specific pockets of your organization where usage is really strong, or there are pockets of your organization where there might be gaps? And how we see companies using this is, potentially looking at that and saying like, okay, on this team, we see that usage is really high. Well, that actually correlates to really high employee engagement survey results. And so you can match up some of the digital engagement strategies to what you're actually seeing with employee engagement or potentially employee retention. You can look at your active groups so you can understand like what specific topics are really resonating with employees. And then if you dive down like a level deeper, you can really go into your content effectiveness. And this is an area where we're doing a lot of work right now, but when you have a specific piece of content like a post or a video, the functionality that we have in platform right now to help you understand how effective that is you can access, what percentage of a video is watched or what percentage of a communication is read. And a lot of communicators find this incredibly valuable because you always have that one stakeholder in your organization who insists that everything must be pages long. And in reality, employees are only spending a few seconds reading things. And so it's so important to get those key messages up at the very beginning and make sure that you're getting the key points across in the limited time, understanding the attention span that your audience has. And increasingly that's becoming shorter and shorter. So you can understand that trend. We do have sentiment analysis across all of our content. So you can understand from your organization how something's being received, and really what you can do differently moving forward. So finding the trends, understanding how you can make your content more effective. Those are the kinds of things that we have in platform right now and that we're working on building out more. And Shannon and Stacey, it'd be good to hear from you guys on kind of what you look at and what resonates with you.
Yeah, we send our CEO every week a one-page dashboard on how his content is doing, what people are reading, and it's what you would expect. It's always the things about people. It's always org announcements. People love to know who's going where, what's happening, what's the scandal. They absolutely love stories like that. And in innovation, investing in the future, these types of growth type posts, slightly less interested in cost and some of the more mundane elements of business. So we do look at it in the all hands meeting for the function every week. And we do send it to our CEO every week, a certain dashboard that I think there's so much data. It's not an issue of having data. It's just an issue of which things do you want to focus on, because it's quite data rich from what I've observed. And it is very helpful. And I appreciate what Lea says, which is that it brings us to a level on par with the commerce and the marketing teams in terms of how we can objectively assess what we're doing and adjust, which is probably the first time we've had a platform where you're not trying to piece something together, where it's really innate to the platform that data and insight is actually just it's part of what comes along with the platform itself. Yeah, Shannon, over to you.
Yeah, so I'm hoping Stacey's going to send me her dashboard so that
I will.
I can replicate that. And we've done probably less on the metrics and analysis. Lea mentioned a lot of the pieces that are kind of very easily available, but what we've been talking about with the team and would really like to be working on going forward is there's, to the point both of you have made, there's so much information contained within that platform around how our employees are engaging and working with one another. And if you think about kind of followership as a metric for talent development and who our next kind of leaders are going to be for the future, it just seems like there's a lot more we could be doing from an analytics perspective, and even predictive analytics around, people's behavior and how they operate to predict where you might be having, retention issues and whatever you can do from an advanced, on a preventive perspective. But then even to take that information from workplace to align with your engagement surveys and how you look at your leaders and their performance. I just think there's a lot more to be doing in that space. So I really look forward to kind of where we go from here on kind of tracking numbers and engagements and views to being able to use the data for things that I think the business will find more valuable than how many people read my post, right? Which is important, but. Yeah.
So we've got about 5 minutes.
Shannon, I have a conversation with your team next week on this topic.
I'd like to take our final question from Ethan McCarty with Integral. Ethan actually asked the question about how Workplace kind of fits into the stack with some other platforms. Ethan, do you want to come off mute and ask that question?
Yeah, thanks so much, Elliot. I spend a lot of time thinking about employee comtech and the kind of recipes that different organizations end up putting together. And so I'm curious how you all see Facebook Workplace playing with some of the other sort of solutions that you have going. I mean, and I said in my question, like a lot of our clients and a lot of what I've seen shows that Facebook is really great for that kind of engagement and interaction and so on. Less great for things like here's where the policy document is, or doing some kind of more transactional thing like signing up for benefits or changing my timesheet and so on. So I'm just wondering how you guys have thought about that overall mix. Thank you.
Yeah, we've been actively using a feature on Workplace called Resources. So we're really looking to build out all those capabilities within Workplace. To your point, there's so many tools, and people just don't even know. It can be overwhelming for employees, especially if it's something that you don't use on a regular basis. The where do I go for this piece, right? And so the resource section allows us to then put in links to the programs for pay, for expenses, for all of those that are pretty easy to find, and then also to archive materials. So we started using this a lot during COVID because we had a lot of policies, procedures, health information we were making available to employees that we wanted to be able to, after we did that post, make those easily accessible and findable. So we started building out those resource sections in Workplace, which is kind of off to the side. And the other thing that's been really helpful, having worked with intranets for a long time, keeping them searchable has always been a real challenge. That you can't find something that you had previously, and I would say that I've found Workplace to be incredibly searchable. So if I put in a topic, I'm going to pull up all the content that's been posted on that topic, or if I want to see what was said about a certain leader or what they've been posting, I can pull that up very easily. If I'm like, I'm trying to remember the last time we made an announcement about, and I just did this this past week, I couldn't recall when we had made the announcement on our return to work plans and what we had said, or no, it was the performance review process, because we're updating our performance review process. Like we put that on hold during the pandemic, and I don't remember what we said. So I type in a few words, and right there is the note that we had posted on that topic. And so, it has your archive of your messages in a searchable format, which has been really helpful too.
Yeah, no, Ethan T. Mundy asked the same question as it replaced the intranet. We were talking about this topic in the pre-call because who wants to spend, no offense to whatever software platform hosts our intranet, who wants to spend money on the intranet? This is about the most boring platform that is loved by no one. And I would much prefer not to maintain two platforms and just to have everything in one place. So I was really excited when Lea and the team and Shannon were talking about this libraries function. And yes, this platform increasingly can house key links, key documents. In a prior life, we had in our intranet 15,000 documents that were used on a weekly basis to run the business. It was a literal behemoth of an infrastructure. And so we couldn't even imagine a day to get off that kind of platform, but it sounds like that day is coming now with some of this increased functionality. So I'm all on board with that because again, we're always resource constrained. We always need to focus, and I would much rather have one platform than two. So this one is on my homework list. So Ethan, good question.
I want to thank everybody for participating today. Lea, thank you so much for the introduction to Workplace. Shannon and Stacy, really appreciate all the sharing you've done about how you've used that platform. All three of you will be receiving emails with a variety of amazing questions from participants that we didn't get to today, and so we'll follow up with all of you. Thank you so much to everybody for participating in this session. We will see you next time.